I mentioned that I would be chatting with Ian Bailey. A lot of different things going on in Ian Bailey's life at the moment. We recently had the drug driving conviction to deal with down West Cork, and then we have two documentaries coming out. One will be the Netflix documentary, and the other will be the Sky Crime documentary. Both of those are coming out in the next few weeks. And on top of that, there's been a new episode as well of the popular Audible podcast West Cork. I haven't listened to it yet. Maybe you guys have. I'll listen to it later on. It's episode 14. I think predominantly it deals with the French trial. But if you haven't followed Sam and Jennifer's West Cork podcast, you should, for a lot of different reasons. Because obviously, this case goes back to 1996 and it still remains unsolved. So Ian Bailey has written to the Garda Commissioner Drew Harris to reinvestigate the case. His relationship with Jules Thomas has come to an end, but he's still living in the Prairie, but for only a matter of time. He will have to move, and he's looking for accommodation. Now, it's kind of interesting, because part of the documentary that's going to be released on Sky, one of the comparisons made to this is that, say, for instance, in the case of the Birmingham Six, who signed confessions that were forced out of them because of beatings and what have you, and then were found subsequently even with a conviction that was unsafe and overturned. It was still overturned in spite of a confession, and I was making that point during my conversation to Ian Bailey that he never admitted to this, and he never signed a confession, and he never retracted a confession, nothing like that. He said from the off 1996 that he had nothing to do with it. But that point, I think, is going to be made, and a lot of other points besides, in the Sky Crime documentary that's coming out in the next couple of weeks. So I caught up with Ian Bailey yesterday, and we chatted through different issues going on in his life at the moment. But I was curious, actually, as to where he was going from the point of view of having nowhere to live, looking for somewhere to live, and unless he finds somewhere to live, he figures he's going to be homeless.
The situation I'm in at the moment is I'm looking for suitable alternative accommodation, and it's very, very difficult to find anything at all here in West Cork. It was even before the COVID relocation thing began.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I mean, it's a fear I have. I mean, it's a reality. I'm trying to deal with it the best I can. I'm very sympathetic to Jules, and I think she's relatively sympathetic to me in as much that she's understanding of the situation. And I'm trying to find, daily I'm doing checks for any suitable accommodation, but it's very, very difficult.
And do you think that you would wish or will stay in West Cork? I know you can't. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I would hope. Well, my hope is that I can find suitable alternative accommodation.
Because you can't leave the country as such because of the European arrest warrant, aren't I right?
That's correct. I mean, even if the UK is no longer part of the European arrest warrant, I'm not too sure if they are or not. They have their own bilateral extradition treaty with France. So even if I was to return to England, I would be arrested at point of entry. Yeah.
So you haven't been back to family or friends in a long, long time in the UK then?
Yeah, a long, long time. I can't remember the last time. I think I was there back in the noughties sometime. And as you know, I wasn't even able to get to my mother's funeral for fear of being arrested.
Yeah. And the relationship, and I don't mean to pry, and if I am, do tell me to stop, but do you think that it's even amazing that you managed to withstand all of these pressures and the relationship lasted for as long as it did?
Well, all I know is that Jules stood by me through thick and thin, and it took its toll ultimately. She was subjected to her own form of torture. I was subjected to my, it was an individual torture and a collective torture. And then it's, taking its toll.
And it's ruined your life, completely tortured you.
Completely. Yeah, I mean, I've had, as a result of a false narrative that was created, I would say this, wouldn't I? To put me in a frame for a crime I had nothing to do with. It's completely ruined my life. It robbed me of my career as a journalist. It's robbed me of any reasonable, legitimate expectations I might have had, whatever they might have been, which would have been probably to, continue writing and be a journalist. And recently I learned that there was DNA found on the body. I didn't know this until actually it came out, I think, from a result of the most recent episode of the West Cork podcast. And I was really shocked about that. The fact that there was apparently male DNA found on the body. It wasn't mine. And that fact had been concealed for whatever reasons.
So this was DNA on a boot added to another story involving the missing gate, yeah?
Yeah, I mean, there are several strands to this. I mean, and I've drawn these points to the attention of Drew Harris, who I'm hoping is as a clean pair of hands.
Okay, let me ask you about that. Have you written to him, to the Garda Commissioner?
Yeah, I wrote a letter last week, which I would have expected to have arrived by now. I haven't had a response. And in that letter, I'm asking him as a clean pair of hands to reinvestigate what I would say was a conspiracy to pervert the course of justice by putting me falsely in the frame for a crime I had nothing to do with.
And you think that because he's reasonably new to the job in terms of time and scale to 1996, that he could look at it through a fresh pair of eyes?
That's my hope, yes. And that's my hope and prayer that he does. I mean, apart from the damage it's done to me, this is a terribly dark stain on the otherwise good name of An Garda Síochána.
But just on that point, Ian, there were 3 reviews of An Garda Síochána, and there was no evidence found of any Gardaí perverting the cause of justice.
I know. I think the reviews were all done by the establishment, and they had a vested interest in coming to that conclusion.
So you want him to reopen and reinvestigate everything, is it?
That's what I'm asking. I mean, I'm an innocent person who's been convicted in France in my absence of a crime I had nothing to do with. And I don't want to sound like I'm, whinging Tom, but it's been a terrible, terrible thing. And it goes on.
And as it goes on, of course, and you talk about robbing you of your career, any legitimate expectations you could have expected of your life, and the breakdown of your relationship, do you still love Jules?
Oh, I mean, that's very personal, but yes, I do. And, I think she's a fine, strong woman. Anyway, look, I don't really want to, that's private and personal.
Have you seen either of the documentaries, either the Sky documentary or the Netflix documentary?
Well, no, I don't. The Sky documentary has been done by Jim Sheridan. I haven't seen it. I've contributed to it. I don't know how it's going to come out. The Netflix documentary, which I think is actually more a piece of propaganda than an objective documentary, from what I understand.
Yeah. You're in both, though. You feature in both. You willingly participate.
Well, I cooperated fully with the Jim Sheridan project. Yeah. I gave the Netflix team of John Dower some limited access to me in the open air, as it were, just being myself. But I didn't do any interviews with them. Do
you have any idea as to how you will be portrayed in either of them? Do you think they'll be positive, negative?
No, I mean, I'm hoping the Jim Sheridan project will be objective and reasonable. I'm suspecting that the Netflix project will be a piece of demonization. And as I say, propaganda. The French family are actually involved in the production at quite a high level. And clearly, they believe that I had something to do with the murder of Sophie Toscan du Plantier. Well, that I murdered.
And they've believed that for a long time. How does that feel?
I think they believe that from almost the get-go of the investigation. And of course, there's never been any actual evidence at all. There've been allegations and
You never signed a confession, you didn't? Never.
No.
Yeah.
No.
So when he investigates again, if he does, how would he come up with a different conclusion, considering so much time has passed? Some of the people are dead.
That's right. Some are still alive. I don't know. All I'm doing is, as an innocent person who's been very, very badly maligned and put in frame for a crime I had nothing to do with, asking him to look at the case again. And I'm hoping that he will. But
and let's say he does. You'd be very optimistic that at least somebody would look at it through a fresh pair of eyes. But if he doesn't, how will you feel?
Well, all I can do is what I can do, and that I've written to him and I've asked him. It's up to him to make a decision on whether he does. And in the meantime, my life goes on, and I'm having to look for somewhere to live, and it's tough. It's not easy at all.
Do you ever look at it from the point of view of 25 years later? Let's say if the DPP had prosecuted you, and let's say that you had been found guilty, you would have done time, you would be out of jail quite a long time now, and getting on with your life with no arrest warrants and nothing hanging over you. This has gone on so long. Do you ever look at it through that kind of a narrative?
Not really. No, I mean, I just tend to deal with the reality of the situation as it's arisen.
Where do you get the strength to do that, though, year in, year out, just to keep living the same nightmare?
I don't know. I mean, I know I have nothing to do with it, so that helps immensely. I've got a faith as well, and that helps me, and I've had a lot of support from a lot of people. And I've been very determined and, to keep on protesting my innocence and to do anything that I could to support that. And writing to the commissioner now is the most recent thing that I, could do to.
Do you think that there's somebody out there, or that there are people out there, one or more, that know what happened on that night?
I'm pretty sure and certain that there are people in Ireland who know I have nothing to do with it. Now, whoever was the killer, I don't know, but I know that there are people certainly within the Garda. I mean, I've even been told by guards informally who I've met that they know that I had nothing to do with it. So.
It's kind of hard to believe that they would say that. Why wouldn't they investigate that then?
I know this would be guards who were not guards at the time of the crime or the initial investigations.
So is it a case that you would need to be ruled out of any further suspicion, or that the Gardaí would find the killer?
Either, in a way, but I mean, the fact that there was DNA found on the body, and it obviously wasn't mine, it couldn't have been, I find quite shocking.
Will that be tested then, that DNA?
I don't know. I'm not aware of that. I mean, I assume it would have been, but I mean, one of the things about this case is that anything that took changed the false narrative, i.e. that I was the murderer, anything that would take the focus away from me has been ignored.
Time and time again.
Yeah, yes.
So, where you find yourself now is waiting for Drew Harris to come back and respond to your letter, and we shall see what happens there. If for instance he does, and you were finally cleared of any involvement in it, because you say you've been robbed of your career, you've been robbed of your life. Firstly, what would you have done with that life and career if this had never happened?
Well, I guess I would have continued being a journalist and writing stories. As it happened, I was able to somehow keep on going, and I focused my creative writing into not journalism, because I couldn't pursue journalism, but poetry. And that's been very cathartic and helpful to me over the years.
And to the future, what would you do with the rest of your life then, if you were free to travel and go about your business unimpeded?
I don't know. I would just hope, and my prayer has always been, that the truth about this would come out at some point before I was dead. And that is still my hope. I don't know.
Okay. Ian, thanks for taking the call as always. Thanks for allowing me to catch up with you. Appreciate it.
Okay, good meal, Margaret.
August 2 friends, long before.
Neil Prendeville, the voice of Cork. Weekdays 9 to 12. Cork's Red FM. RedFM.